Alright, so we're going to do the Unreal Engine Learning Agents. So the tutorial is here. I'll leave the link in the description. Um, the guy that I'm pretty sure made the plugin is the one that made the tutorial here, but I'll leave this link. And there's some modifications I had to do to get mine to work right, and put them on BlueprintUE. I'll leave those links also. Everything that's modified from his code is highlighted in blue, or should be, from what was on this tutorial. But like essentially what it's going to do is we're going to have to train it. It shouldn't take long depending on your PC. Mine didn't take but maybe 20 minutes before they were able to drive around the track efficiently. I know his said 15 minutes to start seeing a noticeable change, and then 2 hours to be able to fully train it, but I haven't run it 2 hours yet. But yeah, so let's get started. You have to be an Unreal Engine 5.3, or in the future, I'm sure it'll be in anything greater than 5.3. First thing you're going to do is come and make a new game project. The vehicle template. I'm going to rename this RL tutorial and hit create. Okay, so a couple things you want to start off with, just to make sure everything's going good. Just hit play to make sure nothing's errored out. Make sure you can drive around. Make sure there's no errors when you hit stop. And if everything's good there, we can continue. If not, then you need to fix whatever's errored out. So next thing you want to do is grab all this stuff that's not necessary. So all the stuff in under ramp, bollards, anything in under obstacles really. We can delete all that. We don't need any of those. Alright, so we're going to go to our plugins folder, or our plugins, sorry, and look for LearningAgents. And we're going to enable that, and then hit restart. It's just restarted. We can make a new folder. Let's call it LearningAgents. And we are going to start making some blueprints in here. So there's not a whole lot to it. It's kind of daunting at first, but it really, compared to most of the things in Unreal, it's not that bad. They made it pretty easy to use. So first thing we need, if we need to go to Blueprints, All Classes, and get a Learning Agent Manager. This is going to be our manager for all the learning that happens. So we can call this BP RL Training Manager. Next thing we're going to need is a policy. So we need, should be here. Yeah, Learning Agent Policy. This is the easiest one because I don't have to do anything in there. So we can call this BP RL policy, or underscore. VPRL policy. And then we need, these are components that will go into your manager. Alright, so the next thing we'll need is a interactor, which will be what handles the observations and the actions that the agent takes in. So everything that it is aware of around it that we specify that it should see or you know, interact with. And also to handle the actions for whenever it outputs a number from the neural network. Alright, so we need to do interactor, Learning Agents interactor. Let me call this BPRL interactor. And then one more for right now should be good. It's called training manager, or not a training manager, but trainer. Learning Agents Trainer. So BPRL Trainer. And then we'll save all this so we don't lose anything. Alright, so we don't have to do anything in the policy. That's the easiest one. Alright, so everything, this has to be dragged into the level. We need one of these in the level so we can make sure that we have one. That's going to have to be in the level or it won't work. The next thing we want to get the, kind of like you see the spline points on this racetrack. We need to basically have those, but as far as I'm aware and as far as the tutorial was aware, that there's no way to do it without creating our own custom one since it's a landscape spline. So what we have to do is create a new blueprint actor racetrack spline. And then we'll just add a spline component. And then what we'll have to do is kind of just lay this out in the same way. Should be able to go like top down, but let's see if we can start here. Well, there we go. So let's go to top and find it wherever it's at. There we go. So we need to turn it. And then what we want to do is kind of make it match up with these lines, right? So we can make it come over to the line. And if you will make these dots line up with the dots that are already there, it'll be much easier. Oh, we may have to go back to perspective to see them, but so this will be our first dot. Doesn't have to be exact, just kind of a general gist. Okay, so we're going to take the second point. We're going to drag it down until it meets this point. And move this in some. Then all you have to do to continue this on is hold Alt on your keyboard and then drag to the next point. And the curve looks a little steep, so all you have to do is move this so it matches up with the curve that's there. And then we'll grab this. And that way the curve is about right. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect. And this can be moved to any point, like you can move it closer to the edge if you want. It doesn't even have to match up. But this just gives us a reference as to where we want our car's target to more or less be at. So make another one, and we'll continue this all the way around the track until we get the spline all the way back to the other side. Now once you get to the last point, you just need to go over here to this side in the details panel and click on your spline, and it should say closed loop. Make sure it's a closed loop. And then if you need to make a few adjustments on this, you can. Alright, good enough. So next thing we're going to do, since we have the spline as a reference now, what we can do is go to our, let's see, go to our training manager, and we're going to add some components, which is our interactor, our policy, and our trainer. We're going to add these as components. So add the policy, the interactor, and the trainer. Okay, so these are components of this. Next thing, since those are there, we'll save everything, make sure everything stays saved and we don't lose anything. We'll go back to the vehicle template. You can do this in the sports car pawn if you want. I'd rather do it in the vehicle advanced pawn just in case you ever want to use the off-road for anything. So on begin play, what we need to do is make a few changes, or not really changes, but just add to it. So we're going to drag this up here, pull the begin play back, do a sequence node, and keep what we already have there so we don't mess it up. I don't need that, no. So off of here, what we need to do is get actor of class. We need to get our BP training manager. We need to say is it valid. It's not valid. We're going to print a string to let us know that it's not valid for whatever reason. So I'm just putting training manager not found in level. And then up the is valid, we're going to say add agent. The agent is going to be self. So this is going to be the agent. Then we need to promote this to a variable called agent ID. So it has a reference to which agent it is. Alright, now once it's registered, we just need to do a print string. We're going to say append agent space, and then we'll do agent ID, and then we'll add another one, do a space, and then registered. Alright, so this will be our learning manager setup. Okay, so once we got that, we go back to our learning content and we can start working on these. So we only really have to set this one up and the interactor up. The manager itself is pretty easy. We can go ahead and start there. We need to do on begin play. Right, so on the reinforcement learning training manager, the only things that we have to do on begin play are drag each one of these components out and say sequence take our 3 components up, and I'm not sure if this matters in order or not, but we just needed to say call setup interactor, then setup trainer, then set up the policy, and we'll get to the variables in just a second. The interactor, we just need to hook the interactor up. That's normal. The policy to the policy, we don't have to hook anything to the critic, we're not going to use it. And on these dark blue nodes, you can right click, promote them to variable, and then you can compile. You'll see the trainer settings and stuff over here. So on the interactor, we just need to hook the interactor here, and then the network we'll get to in just a second. Okay, so I'm not sure if it matters or not, but we're gonna switch this to around because I don't know if the order matters, but just to be safe, this is how it is on the tutorial, so this is how we will set it up. Now, policy settings, promote it to variable. The network we'll create in a second, and then we'll come back and select it. It's easy. And then the end critic, we don't have to hook anything up to that, right? So compile that, it should fix the error. So that's all on begin play. Everything should be left, most likely, as unless you really know what you're doing, just leave everything like it is default. It should work fine. There's one on the tick that I changed, but you can choose to change it in a minute or leave it like it is. Alright, so what we're going to do is get the RL trainer on tick. We're going to say run training. And in the manager, because we're going to be running like multiple instances of each agent, like probably around the 30 or 32 is what is suggested. You want to go to the class defaults. I think it's class defaults, and search for a tick interval and change it to 0.1. And then on the run training, we're just going to promote each one of these dark circles to a variable, and we'll leave them all default, except for one thing on, well, like 3 things on one of them, but that's not in the tutorial. This is just my personal thing. So if you want to, you can just leave them all default. It should work. If you have any issues with it, you can choose to do what I did, which is change the, let's see which one it was, trainer settings. So the only thing I did was on the learning rate policy, I took one of the zeros out behind the decimal, and in order to do that, you also have to take a 0 out, or it's suggested you take a 0 out from the learning rate critic. And then also, I think I left the weight decay the same. So yeah, just change those two. It'll help it converge quicker, I think, to be honest. It helped with mine. Now, these are, if it's false, it's because you want to like pick up where you left off. So say you were training and then you stopped it, it'll save it all. And then if these are false, it'll pick up where it left off. So if these are set to true, it'll reset though. So like if you have one that's already been training and you decide to stop and you don't uncheck these when you start back, it will start all over and override everything that you were training. So make sure that if you stop and you want to reinitialize it, that you uncheck these. Or yeah, so if you don't want to restart it, you uncheck these, come back. That way you don't overwrite your stuff on accident. So to begin with though, you want to check these to make sure these are fresh. So this is like restart the policy, restart the critic network, right? So you don't have to touch this. This is fine like it is. Compile that, save it, and we are done with the manager for now. I think we're done with the manager altogether. And then we will go back, and the next two and last two things we'll have to do is set up the interactor and the trainer, which are going to be the more difficult ones, but they're not too bad. I've linked the code to my, the things I've modified in the training manager, the things I've modified in the trainer from the tutorial, and the things I've modified in the interactor. All you literally have to do is go here, Control C. I'll leave it the links in the description, and then open a new tab, Control V, and then this is my interactor. Okay. And I put the file name right here, so make sure that it's the same thing. And literally, you can just come here, highlight these, Control C, go back to your BP interactor, and then delete all this, and Control V. And if you hit compile right away, it will give you errors because some of the variables are not here. So for all the variables, like here, just right click it, create variable on each one of these that are grayed out, create variable, all the way down through all these variables. And this should be as easy as it is. If you want to, you can go through in the selected class. We need to delete this and re-get that class, which is our BP racetrack. I think racetrack spline. Yeah. And this is just going to be getting a reference to that spline. Get spline is all the way at the bottom. Then we'll hook this up to the track spline. Anything that's in blue, like I said, I labeled that it was modified from the tutorial that's there. It worked out way better for me to do it this way. If you don't want to do it this way, you can always go back and reread through the tutorial. And he also has on his tutorial like copy paste things just like this, but it's embedded. So you can still just Control C and then paste it into your project like you did on BlueprintUE natively. Alright, so let's check for any more that may not be variableless yet. Let's just hit compile to show us a list of errors. Okay, so we need to say create variable, and that's all. Alright, so all of this should be good. It's literally all you have to do. If you want an explanation as to what it's doing, our actions, we're going to set up some actions. Our actions are going to be throttle and steering. I modified the scale values. Then it's going to say get actions once it's running, and for each action that's output from the neural network, it'll come in here, it'll get the float action for the throttle brake, and it'll put the get the action from the neural network for the steering action, and then we'll set the steering input from the vehicle movement component, and then we'll set the brake and throttle from the vehicle movement component in each agent. Alright, and then up here our observations are, this is our track position observation. These two axes at the bottom may seem confusing, but all it is this the X, this the Y, so we don't consider the Z. So basically it's a 2D plane, only considering like the flat ground, we're not considering up or down. And then it's taking a scale of 100 because it's distance. But the track direction, same thing with the axes. It's just getting the observation to make sure he's going in the right direction. Angle observation, I'm not really sure, but the velocity, I don't know what the difference in the angle observation and the planar direction observation is, but those are default from the tutorial. But the velocity observation is just telling it how fast it's going. This is getting the spline components as a helper so we can use it later. And this is the one I added custom, was I'm getting a distance from the center, from our target point on the spline, and I'm making sure that it's at a scale of 1000 because I only want it to go like within a short amount so it doesn't overload and take longer to process. So I'm scaling it down to like a 1 to 1.8, I think is 0 to 1.8, because it's like on a scale from like 0 to 1800, and if I scale it to 1000 scale, it should be like 0 to 1.8 at the most. Now what it does down here, I guess the observations, this is where it sets the actual observations. This is just setting up the fact that we're going to use observations of a specific type. This is where it actually sets them up as to observe. So what we're doing is we're getting each agent, we're getting the location, distance along the spline, and you can look through all this yourself. The only thing that's modified for me is I got a nearest position on the spline point, and I got a distance from where the actual actor or where the agent itself was, and I'm using that as an observation. I'm also using that as a reward in the trainer, but we'll get to that in a second. So these are the observations and the actions set up. Compile that, and then we got one more. We can exit out of this and exit out of that, save everything so we don't lose everything. And then we got our trainer to set up, and this is where we do all the rewards and our resets and our steps, stuff like that. If you've ever used reinforcement learning in a gym environment, it's got our step, everything is laid out here like it would be if you were to write a code for gym. Alright, so we go back to my custom one, and we can just copy and paste it also. And then Control C, go back to our trainer, and Control V. And same thing with the variables. This, we're going to have to delete the spline thing here. We're going to create the variable and then get our BP, racetrack spline. And then we're going to get the spline as a reference. We're going to click on all these and create variable. What this is doing, this is just getting reference to the spline. This is setting up our rewards. So these are saying we want to set these 3 reward types up, right? So velocity along track reward, spline component reward helper. Oh, this is just a helper. This is not actual reward. So this is just a helper for later on when we start setting the actual rewards. So there's a velocity and there's a distance from our, this is mine, I added this one. He's got one that is similar, but I didn't know how to use the whole planar position, so I used what I knew how. So this is mine, modified, yeah. So this is my distance from the center where the spline is at. I'm setting up as a float reward. This one is a scalar velocity, so this is going from only going to be one weight, whereas this is going to be two, because I noticed whenever I was testing this, and I tested a lot of different times in a lot of different ways, that they had more of a tendency to figure out that they could go faster and still get a big reward while kind of ignoring this if I didn't set the weight higher. So I set the weight twice as much on the stand at the center, as well as making sure this was at 1, because if not, they just stayed at the center and didn't move. So that's what these are. This is where we're actually setting the rewards themselves. So what we're doing is we're getting all the agents. We're going through and doing a sequence. First of all, we're going to get the velocity, and then we're going to set a reward. Then we come down to here, which is excuse me. This is my modified also. I forgot to label it. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the location of the car. I'm getting the nearest position on the spline point. I'm getting how far it is away from the spline itself. And then I'm going and mapping a range clamped. So from 0 to 100, at 0 it gets a value of 1 because it gets a reward of 1 if it's at the center. So dead center, it gets a value of a reward positive 1. As it gets further away, up to 100, it goes down to 0. And anything past that, it gets a negative reward starting at 0 and going up to 4. And it's also selecting this. So once it switches over past that, it'll start hitting the negatives and giving it a negative reward. So it'll give it more incentive to stay towards the middle and give it a little bit of leeway. You can adjust these values if you want. These are just what work for me the best. And then, alright, so this is setup completions. We need to set this as a variable. Let me make sure I didn't miss any variables. I don't think I did, but let me just double check. No? Okay. So what this is once we go off track, if we go off track within 1200 off the track, it'll reset that car, and then it'll re-put it at a random position. Same with the planar thing. So the event set completions, this is going to define this. So it's going to get each actor, it's going to get the nearest point on the spline, and it's going to set planar difference completion. Alright, so event reset episode. Why is this not hooked up? It should be hooked up. Let me see. Oh, okay. So the reason that's not hooked up is we have to go to our car and make that function. So we go to our blueprints, vehicle advanced pawn, we make a new function, what was it called? Reset to random spline point. Reset to random spline point. Alright, so I noticed that I did not have the reset to random spline point function on BlueprintUE, although I do believe it is on this tutorial where you can copy and paste, but went ahead and copied it and put it over just in case it wasn't. So all you have to do is make the function inside of your vehicle, name it reset to random spline point, come to this link, Control C this over to your vehicle, and then Control V, and place that there. And I think that we need an input of spline component. We should just be able to drag this over and then name it spline on the input, and then compile. There should be no errors. Alright, so now that we have that, we can go back to our trainer, and off the agents we have our sports car pawn, We have the track spline. We can drag off and type reset to random spline point. Right, so here, and then we drag our spline here, and that's finished. So this will reset episode and reset them all. There we go. Alright, so we got that finished. And now, only thing left that I could think of is the networks. Now, to make a network, we only need to go to miscellaneous, and then go to data asset, and search for, I think it's LearningAgents neural network, and then select, and we'll call this data asset, or DA for short, and we'll call it neural network. And then save. You don't have to do anything. If you want to reset it, you can. If you ever need to reset, you can just reset for any reason. Now we just need to go back to our manager, our learning agent manager, and in that drop down we need to select our network, compile. We also need to, something I forgot before, is max number of agents. We're going to set it to 32 for now. And then compile, save, and then one last thing before we try this out is go to your vehicle and make sure that its collision with other vehicles is turned off so it doesn't collide with other vehicles. So we can just go to the vehicle advanced pawn, it'll do it. If you do custom and then on vehicle we just hit ignore, compile, save, close all this. I think that should be done. And then we need to go to wherever you want it to start. It doesn't matter, they're going to be spawned at random places anyways, but just put up to 32 out, right? Oh yeah, sorry, not that. The sports car pawn. So up to 32 is what we listed it as. So if you want to be one of the race cars, you only need to put 31 out because that'll spawn you unless you change it in the world settings, which I'm going to change mine from the sports car pawn on the default pawn to spectator, just so I can like fly around and watch them instead. So if you don't want to be a spectator and you actually want to be like stuck to one of them, just, you know, leave that as default and only put 31 out. Otherwise, I'm gonna put 32. So just hold Alt and drag and it'll duplicate. Put 4 per row. And then we're gonna make 8 rows. That's my math's right. Alright, so move this down a little. Alright, so there's 1, 2, 2, and then 4. Then we'll just go over to the outline, it'll be quicker. So just select the bottom one, hold shift, select the top one, hold Alt, and then drag, and that should be 8. Make sure that they're kind of, it's going to reset their positions anyways, just as long as they're in the world. Make sure that before we start, you have your manager in the level, your training manager, and then click over to your output log so that you can make sure everything's going to be running like it is when you're supposed to. And now you can hit play and we can test it out. As long as nothing goes wrong. Access none, trying to review more component speed, gear, graph, hold up, what is this? Execute, hold up, what is this? Update gear from player controller. Okay, so why is it? Okay, I forgot one thing. So, yeah, let's go back to our world settings and just change our player controller from the vehicle player controller just to the default. That's what that error was from. Okay, so now let's try this one more again. Alright, there we go. So all of our agents are registered. They're going to kind of look, you know, more or less not very good at first. Although, very shortly after, they should kind of be doing something. So, like, this is the simplified version. On the default one, they have the option to go backwards and forwards, and I just kind of limited that down just to make it quicker. because I didn't see any point in them going backwards, but so they should take about 15 minutes before they mostly stay on track. At first, for the first 15 minutes, they're just kind of gonna just do whatever. But I'm gonna come back in about 15 minutes and we'll see how they look. Okay, so this is around about 15 minutes into it. Our average reward has went up to 5.4, and as you can see, they're pretty much staying where they need to. There's only occasionally they'll have one, like right here, that ran off the road. Other than that, we went from most of them running off the road, and then 15 minutes later, they're pretty much all staying around about in the middle where they need to be. So it works fairly fast. I didn't have as much luck with the default one. I'm not saying it was the, like the tutorial's fault. I think that I may have done something wrong, but I just did it in the way that I knew how, that I understood, so it worked for me. Whichever way works for you best, I would suggest definitely taking a look, because it's a great tutorial, it's a great plugin, and I really appreciate all the people that made it, because I'd been waiting a long time for this. So now that we got our agents training, and we're gonna just for now, just for the tutorial, stop here. You can let yours train longer. All right, there we go. So we can hit stop now. Now, in order to make sure our stuff doesn't get overwritten when we start it back, or if we're gonna start it back, what we'd want to do is go to our training manager and uncheck the checked boxes here to make sure that it doesn't overwrite. So this will actually pick up. So like if we compile this and save it, or to hit play, it'll pick up back where it left off. So they should be about where they were. Then if I zoom out, you can see they're still running the track very well. Right, so that way it doesn't overwrite. If we were to leave those check boxes checked and then start it, it would overwrite all of our progress, so it would waste all the time we've took. So make sure you uncheck those. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it for if we were to say want to ship it in a game or even race it ourselves. What we can do is we can go to our training manager, we can duplicate it, and we're gonna say take this and we're gonna say inference manager for once it's trained. So trained, so we go to inference manager here. We're gonna take this, remove the setup trainer, remove the run training, and then run inference, and we're gonna need our policy. And I'm gonna do that, and that should be good there. That's gonna be our once trained actor. So what we're gonna do is we're going to go to our vehicle template, go to our maps. We're gonna go to the temporarily go to the off-road so we can duplicate the map that we're in, so we don't have to restart everything. So we're gonna duplicate this original map. We're gonna say vehicle trained test, and then we're gonna open it up and save everything just to be sure. And then we're gonna take, we can leave as many as you want in here, but I'm only gonna leave maybe 2 for now, or just I'll leave 1 row. So I'll leave the front row. So I'll leave those 4, and I'll delete the rest. Then we'll put a player start that we have already, move it up a little, make sure it's out of the ground, which it is. And we need to make sure that we delete our training manager from here, the RL training manager, delete it, and instead drag in your inference manager. And then also what we need to do is make sure we go to our vehicle template, blueprint, go here, and we're gonna say event graph. We're gonna move this up so we got some room. We're going to say off of here, I'm going to do a branch, run this to false, and want this to a variable, call it isHuman, and we are going to set this to true by default, and then what we're going to say is another boolean, so branch, and say another variable is trained, or you can do is training and then do the opposite, but so is trained, we're going to do this to false, move it down, but also copy it. We're going to change the actor of class to the inference manager. So that should be good. Right, so what we need to do is make these instance editable, and then compile this and save it. Make sure the is trained is set to false by default so that the training level doesn't accidentally get overwritten or try to run the inference manager. So what we need to do now is make sure we click on these and set the isHuman to false on all four. So you can just select them all at the same time and do it. And then isHuman off. And then in our world settings, set the default back to sports car pond, and our player controller back to our vehicle player controller. Now you should be able to hit play and actually race your trained AI. I forgot that we need to make sure that we take and check our is trained to true. So now we should be able to race. So hit F11 and now we can race them. And these are our trained AI that we have. If I'm missing anything, if I left anything out, if I forgot anything, if I did anything confusing, please leave a comment. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord. I'm always on Discord. It's probably the best way to get in contact with me. So yeah, my Discord name is Fort Bonatar, just like everything else. You should be able to find me on there. Alright,